What about the DOGE impact in Kansas City? First District Kansas City Councilman Nathan Willett in the Northland is here on KCMO Talk Radio. Obviously, it's getting all the attention nationally and a lot locally as well, with some IRS layoffs, with some funding to different vanity projects that also have been cut as well. Nathan, good morning. Thanks for being here on KCMO. When people ask you, hey, what DOGE is doing, is it good, is it bad for Kansas City? What do you tell them?
Well, first of all, Pete, thank you for having me on. Good morning to your listeners. Overall, it's good. I mean, the federal government has about $4 trillion in revenue a year, and it spends $6 trillion. That's not sustainable. And you got to ask yourselves, is a community garden grant from the federal government what they should be spending money on?
Exactly. Now, what about, one of these stories that's gotten gotten a lot of local attention? It was also noted by the mayor in the New York Times over the weekend, is the grant to the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council for an urban farmers market. That got cut, obviously, and there was some pushback on that. What is your response to that, and what's happening there?
Well, first of all, the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Garden, that's a great thing, right? But let's be honest, this grant is not going to stop what they're going to be doing. They have a $2 million budget. They're a nonprofit themselves. So this is talking about less than 10% of their overall budget. So it's not going to shut them down. In fact, we should be looking to here locally to seeing what ordinances is on the books that we should be cutting to allow urban gardens to thrive. Because right now, our city limits the number of days a garden can sell its goods. We limit the size of gardens. You have to go through certain permitting processes to start them throughout the city. We should be looking at local ordinances, taking them off the books to help urban farmers instead of complaining about federal grants.
Man, this is why I had you on. I had no idea. This is great information. So the city limits the number of days. There are permits that have to be dealt with. But I was told without these farmers markets, mothers are going hungry. Well, if that's the case, we should be figuring out how to make sure these things can be open all year round and try to cut the red tape so that way mothers can eat. I say this tongue-in-cheek, but you get my point here.
Yes, 100%. And I'll be honest with you, the Ivanhoe Neighborhood Council has been part of this group looking through our city ordinances, saying which ones are barriers, which ones are good. Most of them, there's things in there that should not be in there. And we're actually looking to cities like Detroit, looking at cities like Seattle. They have more laxed laws when it comes to urban gardens than Kansas City does. That's embarrassing.
So you really want to see more urban gardening happening in Kansas City, assuming it's done in a healthy and efficient and effective way. But that's by getting rid of some of the bureaucratic nonsense that exists in this town that is actually heavier-handed than, let's say, Seattle and Detroit.
Yes, absolutely. And the gardens will tell you themselves what they want done, and that doesn't cost us anything. That just allows them to do what they know how to do.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Okay. Nathan Willett's here, Kansas City Councilman, 1st District up in the Northland. Meantime, the IRS layoffs from last week, that obviously got a lot of not just local attention, but it got national attention as well. Estimates were about 1,000. It came in at about 116. I know it's jobs in Kansas City, but do you put this under the bucket or in the bucket of, hey, this is what the government needs to do right now with a $2 trillion annual deficit?
Well, I'll say this. There's a lot of local jobs out there. Our public works is hiring. There's a lot of other government jobs for them to transition to if they want to. But like I said earlier, we have a $6 trillion spending this year and only $4 trillion in revenue. Something has to give.
Yeah. Now, what do you think when it comes to some of the city priorities? I mean, are there things that the city can be focusing on to maybe make up for some of the losses that may come from the federal monies? And if so, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, I've only heard of one major grant, and I wouldn't even say that's a major grant, $130,000 cut out of, the mayor talked about how we have $360 million in federal grants coming into our city every year. So we're talking about a percent of a percent of a percent here. So I haven't seen too many other grants be denied so far. Obviously, if it's something infrastructure or public safety related, that might be more of a challenge. But other than that, I mean, that's not the role of local government to do a DEI grant for a farmer's market.
Now, when it comes to the police department, or like you said, when it comes to safety in Kansas City, how much of that comes from that $360 million in federal grants?
Yeah, roughly we get about $15 million in grants a year, whether it be from the state government or from the federal government. And so what the city council does is we front them about $15 million, and then they back pay that. But what we should be focusing on, I do want your listeners to know we're in the middle of budget season right now. The police in the proposed budget do get the full ask that they had in the general revenue, but the mayor's proposed budget shorts the police $4 million from the public safety sales tax. Last year, the police got $8 million from the public safety sales tax. This year, he's only given them about $4 million. So that's something that I'm going to be pushing to making sure that we get that for the police.
But if they're getting their full ask, why does it matter where it's coming from?
So their full ask overall. So from the general revenue, they are getting their ask, but they're cutting in other revenue that they traditionally get.
Okay, so they're getting the full ask out of the general fund, but then they're not getting the full ask out of this other pot of money.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Do you know why that is? Is there something else the mayor wants to do with that extra $4 million?
Yeah, they have a ordinance right now in one of the committees that has it going to extra security for different entertainment districts. I'm sure you heard about that. But I think what was happened is that the police have been the most transparent budget. You can go and ask our city finance department. They said Kansas City Police Department had the most transparent budget submission out of any other department within our city. So hats off to them. But this was an ask that they've had since fall, and it was known that they were going to want this kind of money. I think the mayor and some of their colleagues on the council are trying to figure out how can we spend the public safety sales tax in ways that doesn't sound very bad, but if we spend it, then we can't give them the full $8 million ask.
What did the police do with this $8 million?
They want to upgrade different equipment within their cars, their vehicles. So they're trying to do a bond issuance for new vehicles, and they want to make sure that they have the equipment in them. So you're not just taking equipment from old vehicles that are outdated and putting it into new vehicles.
Okay. I got to ask you this, Nathan, because I have never quite understood this, and I'm not sure if you have the answer when it comes to the police budget. And listen, you know that this show will fully back the blue. However, one thing I have not understood is the budget for the police department. Does that include a fully staffed police department at whatever it is, 1,500 workers? And if so, since we haven't had that in years and we're 300-400 off of that, where do those salaries that are budgeted for go?
Yeah, I have to pull the numbers for this year. I think that the number is not for 1,500. I think it's more like 1,200. I think it's something more realistic. I think that is a great question. I know with the salary increases last year, we went from 50,000 to about 65 to 70,000 starting pay because of the pay increases, and we know that we were not realistically going to get up to 1,500. I think they have lowered that a number, but that has been a talking point, especially before I was on the council, and that was a question a lot of former council members ask. I don't know if that's necessarily the case anymore with the budget.
Oh, okay, with the raises being included. I just think it's a reasonable question to ask as we kind of look at, I think when we look at government waste, police are probably low at the list, but I think with every bureaucracy, you can say, hey, let's make sure every dollar is spent efficiently and effectively. I don't think that's unreasonable to ask from every single department, whether it's at local, state, or federal government levels.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, the police budget being so transparent, I have a huge binder, about 400 pages of the police budget. And then the city budget that I submitted to me has 400 pages as well.
I got you.
So they have done above and beyond. And I don't know if that's available public, the police one, but the city overall budget is online.
All right, Nathan, last thing. Tonight, I know there's something for the public. What's going on tonight for people that want to have questions or comments about the $2.5 billion city budget?
Yeah, so tonight at Woodneath Library from 6 o'clock to 8:30, you can go and ask questions to city staff, council members about what's in the budget, and then talk about your priorities that you want to see within it. But the budget is online, so if you're not able to make it, you can submit your questions or look over and see what your local government spends your tax dollars on.
Woodneath Library, Flintlock Road, KCMO, 6 to 8:30 tonight. Thank you, my man. We appreciate it.
All right. Appreciate you, Pete. Thank you.
Nathan Willett, Kansas City 1st District Councilman up in the Northland on KCMO.